on the News Channel 5 network. This is Open Line.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to News Channel 5 Plus. I'm Casey Mason, and we have got an exciting hour of Open Line here tonight, where the topic is one that's been in the headlines, making news recently, and it's one that a lot of opinions are surrounding it. It's the fight over former President James K Polk's final resting place, and it continues on this evening. We are excited to have special guest here tonight, Dan Brown, joining me. Hi, Dan. Thanks for being here.
Hello, Casey. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Well, first, I want to introduce you to folks.
Okay.
Obviously your current position.
I'm the Historic Sites Program Director for the Tennessee Historical Commission. We're the State Historic Preservation Office.
All right, wonderful. Well, we're excited to have you on tonight's show, which is going to kick off tonight with really just talking about what is the topic at hand, Dan.
Okay. I guess, wow, there's a lot of different things to get our heads wrapped around. Again, we're what's called the SHPO's office. I don't know if you know what a SHPO is, but there's two kinds of SHPOs. There's a SHPO office and a SHPO person. So the State Historic Preservation Office is the official office in the state of Tennessee, and we're all state employees that handles all issues related to historic properties. As part of that, there's about 15 of us there. My division is historic properties. We have approximately 16 sites and about 100 buildings around the state that we administrate through agreements with nonprofits. So at each one of these sites we have a nonprofit there, okay, that we give that we're part of administrating a yearly grant that we give to that site. And then we also have a maintenance fund, so we do maintenance for the properties as well. And then we have a whole federal end, which involves particularly things related to this, which is Secretary of Interior Standards, 106 process, National Register, and a number of issues like grants, give grants to historic sites and things like that. So that's what the SHPO offers. There's also a SHPO as a person, State Historic Preservation Officer. That's Patrick McIntyre, our director, and he's the senior federal officer in the state for all things related and all decisions, legal decisions related to issues involving anything to do with federal decisions related to Secretary of Interior Standards, etc., which relates directly to many decisions being made with this, and particularly anything being made with our office. So he's that person. So, and you wanted me to try to explain the issues or what's going on with this?
Issue tonight.
How'd this come up, or how'd this happen?
Maybe set the stage for tonight's topic, which I briefly touched base on, as we open the show, but that's really just what's been in the news lately and what brings you here to tonight's show. Okay.
Well, let's see. We had, I guess, been communicated with by the Polk home. Okay, the Polk home was up until last year one of our state historic sites. Okay, and we had received a communication from the Polk home in our ongoing work with them, and we've been recently there was a project there called the Ormond Building, which the state purchased. We're part of that decision-making process and asking that the state purchase this. So this was purchased, and then about $175,000 was spent. It was, I think, around $150,000–$175,000 to purchase it. Then about $150,000–$175,000 was spent to demolish this structure. It was originally part of the Polk historic site, and so the idea was that this would be included with the Polk. Eventually worked into the existing interpretation. What we interpret sites, physically interpret them in their historical. So in this process, in meeting with them, they communicated that they were interested in considering and pursuing maybe the concept of relocating the Polk tomb, which is now on the Capitol grounds, with ex-President, President Polk and First Lady, Sarah Childress Polk, to the Polk home site, which was a little, I guess, surprising, needless to say, to us in the beginning. So,
and why do you say it was surprising?
It's such a important tomb. It's such an important historical, archaeological place and structure. Such important people in the history of Tennessee They've been in their site there since you know, the middle and end of the 19th century, and it's sort of I guess the idea that you move a presidential tomb is more of a Victorian affectation. This is something that was done during the Victorian age, okay? Presidential tombs got moved around a lot. It was almost a fad, a fashion. You had in the 20th century the development of preservation standards, you know, professional standards, and particularly after, you know, World War II, these standards become codified. Preservation Act of 1966 began to establish the state historic preservation offices and a very organized academic approach towards historic preservation. So that this is something out of the 19th century. I mean, this is horse and buggy kind of activity, logic, you know, sort of the approach towards historic preservation, historic sites. I mean, what's, you know, and so initially it was sort of like, well, okay, we know we're just sort of surprised. And I think there was a general feeling in the preservation community that it was kind of audacious and outlandish, and there was just the thinking that, well, that didn't seem like something that seemed very practical. It was probably wasn't going to get a lot of traction. It seemed to have originated not from the Polk Association, but it seemed to have originated outside from people in the community, and I think a person or other people in the community that seem to have this as a concept. So now, so we say, where did this come from? Why do they want to move the tomb? Okay. We've had a lot of conversations with them over the years. The whole field of historic preservation is changing. Okay. Old farts like me like to go to old buildings, velvet ropes, and all this pretty furniture and antiques there. And you know, my wife and I, we love to do these things. You go there to these places and you see all this great old antiques and stuff, and you join these organizations and you give them an organizational membership, and then you support them. You know, that's the model that existed, I guess, from, you know, end of the 19th century throughout the 20th century. And then with the computer age, everything's changed. You know, computer's free. So young people, you know, when you look at the chart for what is the attendance future, and what is it, how's attendance trending at historic homes, okay, and historic places, and you know, it's unfortunately a downward curve. So all of our historic sites, all of them, are being challenged, and they're all responding to it in different ways, and we work hand in glove with them as many ways as we can to help in the administration to support them and with all the different ideas they might have, to also to help with ideas and things like this. So I guess the Polk home as the supporting demographic for all historic homes begins to change and literally pass away and diminish. Okay, the young people, as we mentioned with computers, they're typically not coming. Younger families, younger people, there's a different kind of interest and dynamic in a different way that they interface with historic places.
So not really physically visiting, but more maybe visiting online, or
they physically they physically visit them in different ways. Okay, so there's a current, I guess, sort of approach out there that's seeing historic houses as more community engaged, and that younger people don't join things and give membership fees and do things like that, but they do attend events. Okay, so they like happenings. You know, they like cool places, and historic places are cool places. When they go to them, it's original, it's authentic. I mean, this is not made up world, this is real world, and it's got some really neat authentic things there, so it's a cool place, you know, and most people, when they interface and get to know historic places, they're cool, rather than their only interface with them is when grandma and grandpa took them there after graduation, or, you know, some type of earth-changing event. You know, that's when they would come to these places. So what we're seeing is these challenges, and the whole point with this is all of our places are being challenged. Polk Place has been challenged, and we've had conversations with them for years. I've been in my job for over 2 years, but I have been in Tennessee for about 12 years, and I have interfaced with the Polk association, with its staff, with its board members, in a variety of different ways and capacities. And we've had these conversations many times. The challenge is here, and it's developing. How do we deal with it? Mm-hmm. How do we look for ways to increase tourism? How do we look for ways to increase people coming to? How do we look to raise our profile? How do we look to change our image, out here? So initially, that was part of the conversation we had. I think as time has gone on, in many of their public statements, the Polk Association has made comments that has nothing to do with any of their goals, but that is not what we've experienced. That hasn't been part of the conversations we've had with them. It seems to be a position that representatives for their organization are taking at this time, but that hasn't been our experience. We've been talking to them, hey, look, we think that this might be a way, and we think that this is an appropriate place for the Polk Tomb to be. Okay, is that we think that the Capitol grounds haven't been visited enough and aren't prominent enough, et cetera, and that the Polk Tomb should be moved down there. We think we can do a better job of promoting it, and supporting it, and I guess portraying it. And the Polk Home is a fantastic organization. They've done some, they are the center in the universe of all things Polk. So they have done and are doing, I think, some of the best work, if not the best work in the world on, maintaining the Polk legacy and collecting and being the focus of collecting Polk ephemera, memorabilia, Polk information. They also have exhibit space. They do different exhibits and have done different exhibits. So it's been a fantastic organization. But so this idea took traction, rolled down the tracks, and took a lot more traction, I think, than anybody in the preservation community, not only locally, statewide, but nationally, thought would occur. Mm-hmm. And so what seemed to be happening, it's our understanding that they retained an attorney. They also had retained a public relations firm and began to take a strong public stance on the move, and began to understand, what do we have to do to move it? What has to take place? Which is, when they first, I remember one of the earliest conversations I had with them in one of our meetings, when this was mentioned, it was just a little surprising, or shocking, should I say. I said, well, that's quite a hill to climb. I said, obviously you have every right to approach things that way. I said, I think our organization may look at it differently, and we would obviously want to weigh in and be part of any of that decision. Maybe we'll have to be as the State Historic Preservation Office. I said, but wow, was sort of my response. And quite frankly, I think we thought this just didn't, it just seemed in many ways nonsensical. It didn't make a lot of sense to us professionally. And it seemed something extremely old-fashioned, et cetera. So what we did was, this started taking traction. One of the things that we did originally, and what brought us to this point, is we then, conferred as an organization and with executive committee on the board with the idea of, we wanted to understand what our authority was as the State Historic Preservation Office, also as the agency with administrative jurisdiction over the Polk Home, is what exactly were the limits of our authority in directing. In other words, we have a historic sites agreement with each one of these sites. So we have a management agreement, we have a contract, we have a management agreement. The management agreement very clearly states you have to follow Secretary of Interior standards. You cannot do anything to the site, make any changes physically, without consulting us. We have had complete control over any physical change to the site. All right. Other than minor So what we wanted to understand was, what are the true parameters if there were any discussions to take place and we were to say, well, we don't want to see this, we are opposed to this, we don't want you to do this, these kinds of things. And in reaching out to our attorneys, in other words, state attorneys, we said, they said, well, you know, we'll look into it and make sure we understand your authority. So
I will pause you right there.
Okay.
And so basically we're leading up to things, and we're going to take a quick break right now, but we will be right back in just a minute. And I'm going to pause you right there, and we'll pick up right where you left off.
Hopefully I remember what I was saying.
Remember where you were at, all right? And you guys call in. We're happy to hear from you tonight. We'll be right back.
Okay.